26 January 2001, India was struck by one of the worst earthquakes in its history. Gujarat's Kutch district reported a powerful earthquake of 7.7 magnitude which upended the lives of around 3.78 crore people. Tens of thousands of people were killed and around 1.5 lakh others were injured due to the earthquake. Narendra Modi, the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, had vowed to rebuild and rehabilitate with the aim to attain the long-term goal of sustainable disaster resilient development.
2001 में गुजरात में भूकंप आने के बाद जो कुछ हुआ देश को नए सिरे से सोचने के लिए मजबूर किया और उसने आपदा प्रबंधन के मायने बदल दिए.
21 years later, disaster diplomacy takes a new turn. Narendra Modi, now India's Prime Minister, expressed his condolences and hoped for an early restoration of normalcy in Pakistan.
जरा ये देखें इंपोर्टेड क्राइम मिनिस्टर को.
मैं सऊदी अरब से होके आया हूँ, मैं यूएई के होके, अभी मैं तुर्की होके आया हूँ और मैंने उन भाइयों को कहा कि आप हमारे बड़े अजीम भाई हैं, हमेशा आपने हमारी मदद की. और मैंने यही कहा जब मैं आया हूँ तो आप समझेंगे शायद ये मांगने आया है, मैं मांगने नहीं आया. मैं आया हूँ तो आप समझेंगे शायद ये मांगने आया है, मैं मांगने नहीं आया, लेकिन मजबूरी है.
Pakistan has been submerged by the worst flooding in the country's history and an estimated 1/5 of the country remains underwater. The United Nations has described the flood disaster in Pakistan as climate carnage and appealed for nearly $460 million in emergency aid for victims, as an estimated 20 million people have been affected, with 2,000 killed and millions left homeless. The natural disaster has led to much international discussion about humanitarian relief and aid diplomacy.
I've seen many humanitarian disasters in the world, but I have never seen climate carnage on this scale. I have simply no words to describe what I've seen today. A flooded area that is 3 times the total area of my own country, Portugal.
Saddened to see the devastation caused by the floods in Pakistan, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed his condolences in a tweet on August 29th and hoped for an early restoration of normalcy. This is the only statement that the Indian Prime Minister has made on the floods that continue to wreak havoc across Pakistan, and that came as a surprise to many, given the steady deterioration of India's relationship with Pakistan over the last 8 years since PM Modi came to power.
Listen, I would love to debate with Narendra Modi on TV.
भारत ने पाकिस्तान की धमकी से डरने की नीति को छोड़ दिया. ये ठीक किया ना मैंने? वरना आए दिन हमारे पास न्यूक्लियर बटन है. यही कहते थे, हमारे अखबार वाले भी लिखते थे, पाकिस्तान के पास भी न्यूक्लियर है. तो हमारे पास क्या है भाई? ये दिवाली के लिए रखा है क्या?
Prime Minister Narendra Modi had famously begun his tenure with an invitation to Pakistan's then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif for the swearing-in ceremony in May 2014. Sharif had come to India along with the leaders of other SAARC nations. Modi's gesture and the meeting between the two prime ministers had held the promise of a new beginning for the bilateral relationship that had suffered a severe setback after the 26/11 terrorist attacks in Mumbai in 2008. However, a string of incidents that followed, with India's red line on the meeting between Pakistan's diplomats and Hurriyat leaders, or the terrorist attacks in Pathankot and Uri, impacted the relationship negatively, and New Delhi made it clear that talks and terror can't go together.
We need political will to defeat terrorism. There can be no justification for terrorist acts, much less glorification of terrorists, a tendency we have unfortunately seen in recent years in some parts of the world. There should be no double standards in dealing with terrorists.
Ties have been hit further over the last few years, especially after the Pulwama terror attack in February 2019 and the abrogation of Article 370, which revoked the special status to Jammu and Kashmir in August that year. That led to the downsizing of the High Commissions in both capitals, and now there are no full-time High Commissioners in either country. The constitutional changes in Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan's response to them took bilateral ties to a new low, and the subsequent controversy involving diplomats of both countries in 2020 have not helped the ties. In April 2022, hours after new Prime Minister Shabbaz Sharif came to power after the ouster of Imran Khan, he asked PM Modi to come forward in order to address the Kashmir issue. The Indian Prime Minister congratulated the new leader of Pakistan and said that India desired peace and stability in a region free of terrorism. In a letter written to PM Modi, Shabbaz Sharif said that Pakistan remained committed to regional peace and security and sought peaceful and cooperative ties with India.
Neighbors are not a matter of choice. I mean, it is something you have to live with. तो चूंकि हम हमसाए रहे, क्या में पाकिस्तान से हम बदकिस्मती से हमारे ताल्लुकात भारत से सही न बन सके, तो जनाब स्पीकर मैं अर्ज करना चाहता हूं कि भारत के साथ हम अच्छे ताल्लुकात के ख्वाह हैं, लेकिन मसला कश्मीर के मुनसिफाना हल तक पायदार अमन कायम नहीं हो सकता.
In the past, when natural disasters struck India and Pakistan, the two countries at times reached out to each other with offers of help. For example, in 2001, after the earthquake hit Bhuj in Gujarat, Pakistan had reached out with help and had sent tents and blankets for the survivors. The then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee had spoken to Pakistan's military ruler General Pervez Musharraf to formally thank him for sending aid. It was not a big consignment, but the gesture was important. In 2005, when a powerful earthquake struck both India and Pakistan, India sent aircraft with relief supplies to Pakistan and pledged $25 million through the United Nations to support Pakistan's relief efforts. In 2010, when a super flood, the worst in recent decades until the deluge of 2022, hit Pakistan, India offered $5 million in help, but Islamabad declined to accept it. Though there has not been much follow-up activity, PM Modi's outreach by way of a message created a potential opening for disaster diplomacy. For the Indian government, the case for extending humanitarian help goes in line with its desire to project itself as the first responder in times of disaster and crisis in the neighborhood. Vaccine diplomacy and the efforts to brand India as the pharmacy to the world have been billed as major achievements of the government. In recent months and years, India has extended its hand of help and cooperation to the Maldives, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan, and Afghanistan. Under Mission Sagar, the Indian Navy has been deploying its ships to send medical and humanitarian aid to countries in the Indian Ocean region and beyond. The question that now arises is, how will India weigh its two policies on the balance when it comes to its hostile neighbour Pakistan? One, its Neighbourhood First policy, and two, talks and terror can't go together. In any case, it is going to be a major brainstorming for New Delhi.